Welcome to Golden and Blue, everybody, home of the college football fan. And don't forget about the checklist. Hat check, sunglasses check, Pepsi check, notes check, sources check, and thick skin is a check. And don't forget to sing gear to represent your team and yourself in my background. Send it to P.O. Box 360, Liberty, South Carolina, 29657, and get yourself a shout out. On to the next video. Hey, you already know what time it is, so might as well sit down, brace yourself, and buckle up because you are entering the speculation zone. In case you're wondering, these are the teams that we don't have represented for the mini helmets. As you can see, we actually have quite a few big brands that's not represented here at Golden Blue. So get your team represented here on Golden Blue. I'm actually hearing that the Pac-12 might have a TV deal on the table, but it's still not looking good. In fact, it may be worse than what we realized. First, yesterday, a comment that was actually on PAC around the corner. If you're not subscribed to that channel, you need to go subscribe to it. Great content over there. This was a comment made by a viewer named James. Update, a deal is expected before the end of March. Apple TV Plus, Amazon Prime Video, and ESPN are all in the mix, with the majority of the games expected streamed. But things are fluid and might change. Of course, I have to mention our favorite college football conspiracy theorist. Here's what he had to say about that. If you start to hear reports of PAC media offer for 25 to 28 million per school trickle out, keep a couple of things in mind. This is a streaming heavy proposal that sees the PAC absorbing the cost of producing their own games. Whoa. And that amount is not reflected in the numbers being bandied about. There would be no ownership of Tier 2 media in the proposal, so no revenue to cover those costs, save what is being paid in the TV deal. Cost to produce the content would be worth north of $75 million a year, counting all sports. So at 10 schools, this would be a $7 to $8 million a year haircut off the numbers. Important to look at total contract value per year, subtract production costs and the Pac-12 office cut, which is rumored to be half of a share moving forward, to get the true number that would be shared per school. There will be Spencers who will not acknowledge this. Yikes. So it seems like the rumors are true that the Pac-12 is looking at a media deal, but it's looking mostly to be streamed. And that's why all these Pac-12 schools are not happy. And if you look at cost of production that's not being covered, you're actually shaving off a little bit from the total revenue anyways. So he's saying that the rumored value might be between 25 and 28 million, but you have to factor in cost production because it's not covered. So basically it's the Pac-12 paying out of pocket to produce their own games through these media outlets because they're not being covered, which means at 25 to 28 million per year, if you're taking off 7 to 8 million, then you're looking at anywhere between 18 to 21 million per team per year. That's even worse than expected. I mean, 22 million per team per year, that's bad. And I know if it's 21 million per team, that's only 1 million less. But still, every million matters whenever you're getting that low. If it's below 20 million, I would say no deal if I were any of the teams. No wonder a grant of rights is not being proposed or signed by the teams. This is absolutely crazy. I mean, you wonder why these teams are talking to the Big 12, and that's established. Now, whether these teams actually jump to the Big 12, that remains to be seen. But these teams are talking to the Big 12, and if this is true, no wonder why they're talking to the Big 12. This is absolute craziness. You cannot expect teams to play for around 20 million a year compared to these other conferences, especially the Big 10 and the SEC. They're going to be playing around 80 to 100 million a year here pretty soon. The Big 12, I mean, not as good as that, but it's still 31.5 million per team per year. 20 million per team per year? That is unacceptable. So if those are facts, if this is true, then I would say the Pac-12 is going to be picked apart sooner rather than later. Honestly, I was giving the Pac-12 a little bit of time. Maybe they're able to convince Washington and Oregon to stay, even though they're not willing to sign a grant of rights past 3 years. That's fine, whatever. They're also wanting unequal revenue share, which I think maybe affected the ACC because a few short weeks later, after Oregon and Washington said they wanted unequal revenue share, that's when we started hearing Florida State Athletic Director, Clemson Athletic Director, Miami Hurricanes Athletic Director, and the North Carolina Athletic Director come out and say, hey, we want unequal revenue share. I will do a video on that separately, but I think we could be looking at a cause and effect type of situation. So if this deal is actually more around 20 million or maybe even less than 20 million per team per year, and Oregon and Washington want unequal revenue share, the rest of these teams, they're not going to be happy about that. They're not going to be okay with that. Even though Washington State and Oregon State aren't necessarily the best brands in the Pac-12, they are certainly worth more than that. I mean, that's spitting in their face. And then you factor in Colorado, Arizona, Arizona State, Utah, Cal, and Stanford even, all taking the cut because Oregon and Washington want unequal revenue share on an already horrific, terrible TV deal. No, that's not going to fly at all. And that is why teams are talking to other conferences. And on top of that, Oregon and Washington aren't going to sign a grant of rights past 3 years. The Big Ten is thinking about offering them a reduced revenue share contract anyways, which would be worth around $40 million per team per year, which is way more than anything the Pac-12 could offer, even with unequal revenue share. So they could be leaving anyways. And I've already set up the timetable as far as the teams jumping from the Pac-12 to the Big 12, talking about Arizona, Arizona State, Colorado, Utah, possibly Oregon State, Washington State. It's going to happen after the Big Dance because the Big 12 doesn't want to take any shine off the Big Dance. But as far as Washington and Oregon jumping to the Big 10, that's going to happen after the Big Ten decides who their new Big Ten commissioner is. And no, that's not saying it's all because of Kevin Warren. Kevin Warren actually wanted Oregon and Washington, but they want to make sure they know who their new Big Ten president is going to be. That's the more pressing matter. They want to get that done. And then the talks between Oregon and Washington should really start to heat up, and we'll probably see a decision in the offseason during the summer. So this is just another knock on the Pac-12 that's going to cause these Pac-12s to bolt sooner rather than later. I have full confidence that these teams are going to bolt. To me, it's a matter of time. When are they going to do it? Not if they're going to do it. Because here's the best case scenario for the Pac-12. For whatever reason, all these teams decide to sign for this terrible TV deal. Maybe Oregon and Washington get their unequal revenue share, but they're only going to sign a grant of rights for 3 years. So they're going to be gone in 3 years anyways. And let's say the rest of the Pac-12 stays intact until the next TV deal. Then that TV deal is going to be horrible because you're looking at the Pac-12 trying to backload. We know they're interested in San Diego State, Fresno State, possibly Colorado State, and SMU. A conference like that is not going to get a good TV deal. So all you're doing, if these teams do agree to this TV deal, all you're doing is buying time. Because Oregon and Washington, they're going to be gone in 3 years. And then the next TV negotiations, the rest of the Pac-12, as far as the more major brands, they're going to leave as well. Maybe they're wanting to keep their options open, hoping maybe the Big Ten comes to calling. Maybe that's why Utah's athletic director said what he said, because maybe the Big Ten is interested in Utah. And I did a video on that earlier today. You might want to check that out. It is very, very possible that the Big Ten is interested in Washington and Utah and not Washington and Oregon. Or they could be interested in 4 teams, Oregon, Washington, Utah, and Stanford. And as long as they're willing to take a reduced revenue share, then maybe the Big Ten thinks about all 4 of them. But it is very, very possible that Utah is higher up on the pecking order as far as who the Big Ten is interested in. And that would explain a lot of things, which means we could actually see Oregon to the Big 12 in the near future if the Big Ten isn't interested in Oregon, because they're only going to take 2 teams, maybe all 4 if they include Stanford, and then they're going to focus on the ACC. And if you're some of these teams in the Pac-12 that's getting left out by the Big Ten, you actually better hope that the Big 12 picks you up, because they could stop at 2 teams, Arizona and Colorado, and then wait on the ACC and see what the ACC does. Because remember, the ACC, they could be in some trouble real soon as well, because we're already hearing from the athletic directors from the more prominent schools saying, hey, we want unequal revenue share. If enough people jump on board of that, then they can have the majority needed to vote down the grant of rights and the ACC dissolves. And then the Big Ten, the SEC, and the Big 12 will shift their focus to the East. So these teams in the Pac-12, if they have an offer, they need to jump now, because in the future, the focus won't be on them. It will be on the ACC. So if I were these 4 corner schools and the Big 12 is interested, I would jump sooner rather than later, because your window of opportunity might only be so big. And then later on, the Big 12 turns its focus onto the ACC. And then you're stuck in a leftovers Pac-12, making a fraction of what everybody else is making. I'm just saying, you need to be thinking ahead of things, not just in the here and now, like, oh man, we really don't want to go to the Big 12. We're used to the prestige and the academics in the Pac-12. Well, you need to be thinking about 5 years from now. And if you don't make the jump now, you could be stuck in a leftovers Pac-12. So you'll let me know in the comment section. Number 1, what do you think about this horrible TV deal that the Pac-12 could be looking at, and the fact that it's heavy on streaming? Do you think these Pac-12 teams should try to gut it out and stick with this bad TV deal and maybe hope the Pac-12 can get a better TV deal the next go around? Or do you think these teams need to get out while they can get out before the focus shifts off to the ACC? That's all I got for this show. Like and subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you on my next show.